Well, after today's markup meeting by the House Rules Committee, the House is expected to vote as early as tomorrow to launch a formal impeachment inquiry into President Biden. Now, this follows months of investigation into an influence peddling scheme that netted the Biden family millions of dollars from foreign individuals and companies. According to House Republicans, this inquiry is necessary not only due to overwhelming evidence, but also to provide investigators with the ability to view documents and conduct interviews that so far the Biden Department of Justice has stonewalled. Now, with such a slim House majority, the question is, do the Republicans have the necessary votes to move forward? We're going to find out here momentarily when we're joined by Ohio Congressman Warren Davidson. But while we're waiting for him to get off the House floor, we're going to go to Sam McCarthy, news writer at the Washington Stand, to talk about the issue that we've actually seen in the news in Texas, where the Texas law protecting the unborn. We've seen a mother appealing to the courts to try to have an abortion. What we've seen over the last few years is an increase in out-of-state travel for abortions. So joining us now to talk about this, Sam McCarthy, news writer at the Washington Stand. Sam, welcome to Washington Watch.
Thanks very much for having me on, Tony.
So let's talk about this increase in out-of-state abortions. Is this the result of states that are adopting pro-life laws? Therefore, we have people going over into neighboring states that have laws that do not protect the unborn?
Yeah, it absolutely is. So after the fall of Roe, you had a lot of states implement trigger laws, which effectively banned or almost completely banned abortions in the wake of the dismantling of Roe v. Wade last year. A lot of these states border states that have no abortion restrictions. One of the chief examples is Illinois. Illinois borders 3 states, Indiana, Kentucky, and Missouri, all of which have enacted stringent pro-life legislation. And so you've got people in those states seeking abortions traveling to Illinois, which has no restrictions on abortions.
So how does this factor into what we've just seen play out in Texas?
But you've got this notion of we've discussed this before. We actually, Family Research Council hosted a pro-life town hall meeting earlier this year, where we discussed the idea of what role does the federal government have in pro-life legislation at this point? Does the federal government have a role? And you had Senator Lindsey Graham argued that you have to have some kind of standard. You can't just have, New York and California committing abortions from, the moment of conception till up to the moment of birth, whereas you have states like Texas where you can't get abortions anywhere in the state. So it's really, you have to have something standardized. And so we're seeing, especially now that we have this sort of, to reference our scripture quote, lawlessness in some sense, this lack of a standard, this lack of consistency across the nation with regard to protecting the lives of the unborn. We're really seeing a need for such a standard on a federal national level.
I mean, how does that work going forward? I mean, if you have this patchwork of laws in differing states, I mean, it becomes very difficult, I think, for states that, have taken a stand for the sanctity of human life to protect the unborn. You've got a neighboring state that does not. I mean, long term, it just doesn't seem to be workable.
No, I don't think that it is. I don't think that it's going to be. I think that what we're seeing now is we're seeing essentially each individual state, largely through referenda. We've seen a lot of referendums hosted throughout especially over the past year, with various states, from Ohio to Michigan to Maryland, trying to install abortion as a right in the state's own individual constitution. What we're going to wind up with is sort of, in some sense, what we saw shortly before the American Civil War back in the 1860s. We're going to see each individual state having its own definition of what constitutes as a human being, who qualifies for rights as a human being, and who gets treated like a human being. And we're going to reach a point where we have some states that, are just completely going to disagree with other states. We're going to have some states like Texas or Florida that have very strong pro-life legislation in place. We're going to have other states like New York, like California, like Illinois, that have no pro-life protections of any kind and don't consider an unborn child a human being. We're going to have this diametrical ideological opposition that's really at the heart of the value of human life. Human life is not going to be able to maintain any value in America unless we agree on what constitutes a human life. Where does it begin?
So, Sam, you mentioned earlier the legislation being put forth by Senator Lindsey Graham, the 15-week bill, the point at which a child feels pain, can suck his thumb in the womb. That piece of legislation, if it were to become law, simply sets a minimum threshold, saying that if your state, like Texas, has a more protective law, whether it be a heartbeat bill, at conception, whatever it might be, you can go forward with that law. But as a nation, there would be this standard of 15 weeks. At that point, no abortions. I mean, it seems like, given what we're seeing play out here, that something like that would have to happen.
I think so. That would be a good starting place. I mean, look at it. It took us just about 50 years, just shy of 50 years, to take down Roe v. Wade. We're going to have to start somewhere, and a 15-week ban is a standard across the nation on a federal scale. I think that would be a good place to start. You'd set a threshold, so it wouldn't be something that a lot of people would reject in referendums, and then you can work from there, from that point forward, so that you can get every state having legislation along the lines of Texas or along the lines of what Florida is trying to do, which is currently tied up in court. They right now have a 15-week ban. Governor Ron DeSantis signed a 6-week ban into law. The 15-week ban was challenged on a constitutional basis. It's in the state Supreme Court. As soon as the Supreme Court rules in its favor, which is looking likely, then the 6-week ban will supersede that. So as long as we have a starting point, it took us 50 years, like I said, to undo Roe v. Wade. It could take us that long to undo this thing on a state-by-state basis if we have to, but it's worth it.
Yes, and there are other options out there, other policy proposals that have been put forward that would prohibit transporting minors, for instance, across state lines to get abortions. When you have a situation like this, of course, it's not going to cover everything, but it certainly deals with the issue of minors, which is something that we're going to see more of. But this doesn't address where we're seeing most of the abortions now occurring, and that is through the abortion pill, which the Biden administration is trying to make ever present through the mail, as well as turning pharmacies into abortion clinics almost on every corner.
Yeah, which is thoroughly, there's no safeguards put in place. It's a thoroughly dangerous practice.
Yeah, so the work ahead, as you said, you pointed back to the 50 years it has taken to get here. We got here by winning hearts and minds, educating people, using technology as part of that springboard of showing the humanity of the unborn. That process will have to continue. Sam McCarthy, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Tony.